Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on this very special fireside chat to honor Women's History Month. I'm very excited to be joined by four incredible women on this call today. I want to kick us off with just a few stats from the ABA, just to set the stage. In 2016, women became a majority of law school students. 4 years later, in 2020, women became a majority of general lawyers in the federal government. In 2023, women became a majority of law firm associates. Soon, the prediction that is in 25, women will likely become a majority of full-time law school faculty members. So it's definitely a meaningful change, although men still dominate the upper echelons of the legal profession through federal judgeships, legal Supreme Court, law firm partnerships, and corporate counsel positions. So this is definitely, again, a meaningful change, but there's still a lot to do. So this session is meant to be an opportunity to hear from accomplished women in the legal profession. They're going to share their experiences, challenges, and successes through candid conversations, and we'll, go through a couple of questions as well at the end. So let's dive in. I'm Mary. I manage the brand and comms team here at Link Squares. I'm very excited to pass it off to Ashley to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Jones, and I am commercial counsel here at Link Squares.
And Alyssa.
Everyone, I'm Alyssa Harrington, and I am the Deputy General Counsel for All Elite Wrestling, or AEW.
Awesome. And Krista.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Krista Russell, and I am the head of supply chain legal at Airbus US.
Awesome. And last but not least, Ashlyn.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashlyn Donahue, and I am the Director of Legal at Link Squares.
Awesome. Thank you all. So, really, to start this out, I would love to hear about each of your individual paths. I know that everybody has had kind of a different journey to end up where they are right now. So, I'm curious about maybe your first role and how you got there. Ashley, I'll start with you again.
Yeah, so funny enough, if you asked my mom about my legal trajectory, she would have told you that this was destined from the beginning because she named me after Ashley Abbott, who is a character on the soap opera The Young and the Restless. And she was, funny enough, a lawyer, and my mom was very inspired by that. And, she said that this was set in stone. But I actually took a very non-linear path to law. I was a fine arts major in undergrad, and towards the end of my degree, I found myself doing a lot of public performance and socially engaged practice work, which really led me to have to review local city ordinances and laws with respect to the work I was going to be doing in the public sphere. And this really intrigued me, and that's where I really found sort of my attraction to law and just a legal career, as seeing that as a path for myself. So I ended up taking the LSAT, going to law school, and wanting to specialize in intellectual property law. But funny enough, we all know how things go. I tried to dabble in everything and actually found myself working at a nonprofit right after law school as a contracts manager, and worked for as long as I could, had to make some changes for sustainability, and ended up moving in house. And I did do a little bit of a brief stint at a law firm before coming back to in house to my home now, which is Link Squares. So I've dabbled in quite a few things, and definitely my experience runs the gambit when it comes to the legal field.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, I think we'll get into a little bit later too, going from in-house to law firm and back to in-house, and kind of how you got there. For now, I'm going to pass it to Ashlyn to kind of give us your path.
Yeah, so, I was in college and had a minor in both economics and poli sci, but really wanted to get into business. And the natural path would be to go to business school, but felt like I really didn't enjoy that as much as I enjoyed the legal related classes, and happened upon an article that said that, a large percentage of Fortune 500 CEOs actually had their JD. So I decided, hey, why not? I'm going to pursue this law path. I'm really enjoying it. And so went to law school, and, really quickly in law school tried a few different things as an intern, and realized what I wanted to do was negotiate tech contracts. Now that's super specific. and not always the easiest thing to do right out of law school, because usually there's this progression where you go to a law firm. And so I really just networked. I talked to anyone I could find about how to get in-house at a company doing contracts, and happened to land a role doing just that in a finance department, kind of managing the deal, getting the first pass at negotiation, really learning what a deal meant from end to end, because of someone I met at a dog park. So it was a pretty fascinating way to get my first gig, and from there have kind of moved as the winds have taken me, with new and differing opportunities to learn and add skills to my toolkit.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashlyn. I think we'll get into kind of that building community a little bit later too. For example, having conversations with people at dog parks. So thank you for that. Very cool. Alyssa, what about you? What's your career path look like?
Thanks, Mary. Well, like Ashley, mine wasn't a straight line at all. It was more of a winding road. And so I started out going to an undergrad. I was focusing on poli-sci and comparative religious studies, which doesn't seem like a natural path to the law, but you are looking at a lot of text that people wrote who are now dead, and trying to figure out how that applies to your life now. So it moved on to me working in government, and so my first set of jobs were all in government and in policy. I ended up getting a master's in advocacy and political leadership, working at the Minnesota State House, and then I moved to the Department of Human Services. And while I was there, I basically hit a ceiling for my job potential, because everyone above me had a law degree. And so I took the LSAT. We were fortunate in Minnesota to have really good part-time law programs. And so I was able to go to law school at night while I was still working, and loved it. But I was planning on just doing whatever I loved in law school, because I figured I would be going back into government. So I, interestingly enough, like actually ended up specializing in IP law. And so I specialized in it, completely didn't think I would ever use it, but I figured it was the thing that I liked the most, learned a lot about it. Graduated law school, was still in the government, and I, unfortunately, my brother passed away 3 days before I was supposed to take the bar. And that made me really reevaluate what I was doing with my life. And I ended up going to work for a judge as a clerk in criminal law, and then went to a firm, a medium-sized firm that specializes in only government contracts. So I was working in a firm, but I was also only working for government clients. I did that for about 5 years, including work on bonding and venues and that sort of thing, before moving over to what seems like a huge leap, which is to work for the second largest professional wrestling company in the world as in-house counsel. But surprisingly enough, wrestling has a lot of parts of venue contracts, IP. I got to go back to my love of that, and there are actually a lot of regulations, and so I get to work in all those areas now.
Awesome. Thank you, Alyssa. And Krista, we'll pass it to you.
Awesome. So I relate to bits and pieces of all of those stories, particularly the destiny component of it. Like any good rebellious teenager, I was fighting tooth and nail against what everyone had told me my whole life would be my path, which would be to be a lawyer. And so I jumped around college majors a bit, ended up with a pre-law major, but in my mind, it was because people would think lawyers are smart, so I'll go into business. I'll just have a pre-law degree and not, and, make my parents shut up a little bit, and also be a smart way to get a job. Um, and continued, got a master's degree in my path of avoidance of practice of the law, and ultimately succumbed to my fate to be a lawyer. But I was determined to kind of do it on my own terms. So I had a non-traditional path. Have not worked a day of my life in a law firm. Didn't want to. Was really really interested in business and wanted to find a way to find the place where business and law intersect. And so I carved out my own path and took some non-traditional, or at least non-strictly legal jobs right during law school and right out of law school that led me to just kind of catapulting my career, making a couple early moves, and ultimately I moved to where I am now. I've been here for about 5 years now at Airbus US Space and Defense.
Great. Thanks, Krista. We'll stay with you for this next part as we kind of transition to, some hurdles or challenges that you were facing either earlier in your career or it could be more recently. So, Krista, what were those initial hurdles maybe that you have faced?
Is it is it a bad thing to say I've had a lot?
Oh, of
Um,
course. Tell us.
there really have been, starting early in my career when I was taking a like dual business and legal role. Everyone else is right out of school working for, various size firms making crazy money, and I was not, but I had a job. Um, that was a challenge, I think, just kind of wrestling with some of the self-doubt and questioning my path, and the validity of what I was choosing to pursue, and the why behind it was part of the early struggle. um, as I grew into maybe like the more middle stage of my career, I think I'm still in the middle stage of my career, but as I began the middle stage of my career, there's other growth challenges, everything from balancing, eh, as you establish a family, and challenges that come along with that. I have talked a lot in my personal path about, I was previously married to a spouse that struggled with various things. I'll say that, and that really took a toll on me personally and my journey. And then just the growth challenges as well, dealing with everything from, what was the path I was carving for myself? How did I want to establish myself? What was the brand I wanted to make? And how did I want to distinguish myself as a lawyer amongst many in the profession? So, um, and probably many others of varying sizes and scopes along the way. So I think I've had a quite a bit, and I think that's just a sign of evolution and growth. As I look back on it, it's all been part of the journey.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Krista. And we'll get into that too a little bit later, building your brand, kind of from all of those experiences that you've had. Alyssa, I'll pass it to you about, some first challenges or hurdles that you faced in your career.
Thanks. And like Krista, part of my early challenges had to deal with other people in my family. And as I mentioned, 3 days before the bar exam, my brother died by suicide, which is something that put me suddenly into the position of not only being a lawyer and preparing to be a lawyer, but also at the end of that year facing what appeared to be a government report of my brother's death and becoming a client myself, which really changed my view of what the practice of law was about and how I wanted to incorporate the lessons that I had learned in that, including learning more about trauma and the law and how that it really impacts us as professionals. And so trying to find a place where that was going to be respected and used was really important to me. So when I was looking for my next jobs, I wanted to make sure that that was part of it because that became such an important part of my life. When I switched over then to working for AEW, I actually switched to working with my spouse. So my husband uh, works at AEW as well in a leadership senior position. And so we joke that I'm very in-house counsel because I'm upstairs from him. But that comes with its own challenges, right? Because then we're balancing the business needs and what's going on with the job as well as our home life, and whose meeting is more important than the other if the dog starts barking, those types of questions. And so that's been more of what I've been dealing with more recently.
Can I just
Thank you so
interrupt
much.
real quick to say that reminds me so much of like the COVID struggle. I used to make a joke about like I went from in-house counsel to in-the-house counsel when like everybody was home and having to work, but like you're still living out that, and that's so cool that you guys have that relationship. Of course your meetings are more important, of course.
Legal ones, right? Clearly more
Yes.
important.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Alyssa. It really, paints a picture for how you got your start. So I will pass it to Ashlyn now for your challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, there's always going to be hurdles, and I call them opportunities that you have to overcome. There's just a lot that, you can be faced with, particularly as a younger attorney, or even, as you're finding and navigating your path. And I think the things that stand out most to me are the times when I didn't have a strong network and I didn't really know a lot of folks, and I tried to make connections and learn, like, how can I get my first legal job, or what can I do to get my next legal job, and was just met with so much criticism and, you know not helpful, like, not helpful recommendations, like, basically you're not going to succeed. And those are the things that I think make you stronger along the way as you're navigating your path. But in the moment really creates a lot of self-doubt. Am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right choices? um and so I think, that's something that I've taken to heart, and I'm always open to pick up a call, uh, and lead with positivity and hopefulness and things, when folks are trying to learn what their legal path is, because I didn't know any lawyers. So I didn't really have any frame of reference. I didn't know what was possible or what opportunities were out there, and kind of had to figure that out. And that was challenging.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashlyn. Ashley, last but not least.
Yeah, I really want to double click on some of the sentiment that everyone shared, and really understanding the why behind the career decisions you're making, and the why behind going into legal. And I think that's something that I definitely struggled with early on in my career, especially when you add in the word no, and being able to accept when and how to say it, the power behind it, the meaning behind it. Because as a young black woman starting out my legal career, I really didn't feel like no was in my vocabulary to say. So that meant I was taking on projects and things that I probably didn't have to, because I didn't understand that no was an option. And I think as I sort of wrestled with that and understood the meaning and power behind it, and really was working on the why for myself internally, I was able to understand that, hey, I can not only say no to these additional tasks, things like that, but I can say no to the career path that I'm on, and I can pivot. I don't have to do this thing because this is what I thought was in my path or in my journey. I can take control of that and empower myself to say no. And I say that now. It's an ongoing struggle. The word no is amazing, but it's really hard to say sometimes, and hard to wrestle with, especially if you're making large career choices, feeling that sense of defeat. Am I doing the right thing, as Ashlyn mentioned? And I think that that's definitely something I continue to face, but was definitely the biggest hurdle for me starting out my legal career.
Ashley, I'm curious, was there something that gave you the courage to say no the first time, or that there was something that kind of supported you in that journey?
I think really taking a step back, and I'm a big list maker. So I definitely started with a pros and cons list of the current state of my personal life and my professional life, and seeing where those two things balanced out. And I built a network that supported me in increasing the number of pros and mitigating the cons. So that network included people in similar career places, people above me, included my friends, my family, and really taking a look at my mental health and prioritizing that, and understanding how things were affecting me on the outside. And that made me feel empowered, and that I was going to be able to make decisions for myself and surround myself with individuals who are going to be able to help and lift me up to do that, versus feeling like things were moving around me and that everything was out of control. So definitely taking that step back and allowing myself to do that, no matter what that really looked like on a day to day, was definitely what was most impactful for me.
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, I think it's very important to kind of take stock of what's going on around you, and then also be able to take that accountability and that ownership as you're thinking about, like, maybe why you're feeling overwhelmed and that sort of thing. And something that I've heard kind of recently was no is a full sentence, and that kind of stuck with me. So with that, Ashley, I'll stick with you. Just like as you were taking stock of everything and like that career path that you were on. I know we talked a little bit about you being in nonprofits and then going to a law firm and then in-house. So I'm curious about what that kind of looked like for you going from in-house to firm to in-house, and what the opportunities that you saw were there, just kind of what that career path looked like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what really enabled me to make that switch was creating a niche for myself and leveraging that to make those kind of lateral shifts. So I love contracts. I mean, my favorite class in law school. I do a lot on my spare time, reviewing clauses and just trying to become the best negotiator, contract expert that I can. And I think that leaning into that when I'm looking at any kind of role, whether it's in house or at the firm, really helped me into being able to make that transition. So when I was in house, I was similar role that I am now, supporting a sales team, negotiating contracts, being a commercial leader there. And my role at the firm was I had a contract specialty, and I worked almost exclusively with tech companies and clothing companies. So very much stayed within that realm of IP and contracts commercial work. And I think leveraging that and leaning into the specialty and my interest really enabled me to make those transitions.
Great. And Alyssa, what about you? What was your path between in-house and firm?
So at the firm, like I said, I was focusing specifically on uh, representing small cities and other government entities, but as general counsel. And so I had a little bit of the opposite side of the coin from Ashley, in that it wasn't that I was specialized in one thing, it's that I had to have a really broad idea of what were all of the issues that could face a city. What was everything from the liability risks to the personnel risks to a little bit of IP, a little bit of, because I was representing an amphitheater. It's not usually something that you end up doing when you think government attorney, and so I had a really broad range of specialties. I also had a broad range of experiences. So not only was I behind the scenes doing memos, writing contracts, negotiating them, but I was also working closely with elected officials. So I was working with city councils, with mayors, on leadership, on how to present difficult issues, on how to have difficult conversations, on what we could do to prevent these problems in the future. Plus, I was up on the dais with them. So I didn't get to just be a private person. I was in front of the public and had to learn how to think on my feet, had to practice being able to talk about Robert's Rules of Orders or the local ordinances, and not only explain what was happening, but react in real time to people who were asking questions. So it gave me a lot of really broad experiences that gave me a chance to get experiences in a more general fashion, which is a great way then to transition to what we needed for AEW, which we were bringing on a new television show. We tour 52 weeks a year, which means that we have a minimum of 52 venues we visit. We often are playing two venues a week. And so 104 venue contracts, all the music licensing, all of the, we have a roster of over 175 wrestlers. Plus, we have all of the uh, employment and other issues you'd have with having a company. And so, again, that broad experience was really helpful in making that transition, because I could show that whatever it was that we needed, I could lend a hand.
Awesome. Thank you, Alyssa. I think we could have an entire webinar on how to have difficult conversations. So maybe that's to come. um, is there anything, Alyssa or Ashley, that has stood out to either of you as being, I don't know, advice for anyone that's maybe looking to make that transition from law firm to in-house? I see Ashley, you nodding your head.
Yeah, I think it's probably the key of what a lot of us has touched on throughout is understanding the why behind that transition and leveraging it to your advantage. Whether you're making a change like I was based on a specialty, or if you're making it and like on the reverse as a from having that general understanding and that fluidity to be able to move from um, claim to claim, topic to topic, understanding that and using that to your advantage, I think shows a lot of strength in terms of the job search if you're making that move, as well as in the interview process to be able to leverage your experience, no matter it's whether it was in-house or at a firm previously, to the company that you're interviewing's advantage.
Awesome. Thank you. Alyssa, anything to add?
Yeah, I think adding to what Ashley just said, the biggest thing is figuring out how to leverage what you've done and thinking about what you've done in the context of what you want to do. So, what are the skills? What are the specific things that you've picked up that are analogous? And how can you make that connection between two things, even if they seem like they're not the same? But how do you make that transition if you know you can? And then, as you know, Ashley said earlier, making having those relationships, knowing about the place you're going, and once you are making that transition, getting to be successful, making those relationships with other people in your company, with people in other areas, other silos, other verticals, so that you're part of the company and not kind of this other entity out there like you can be when you're outside counsel.
Awesome. Thank you. That kind of transitions us into our next point about really like having people in your corner, having those mentors or those supporters, people who can be your champion basically. Ashlyn, I know this is something you're very passionate about, so I want to have the chance to hear from you. And then we'll pass it to Krista to talk a little bit about building your networks and then also building your brand. So Ashlyn, we'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I think that really having a sense of, who's in your network and, how you can propel them forward and how they can propel you forward, is important. And the folks in your network are not going to all play the same roles. And so you really need to think about how everyone shows up and how you're going to interact with each other. So, for example, I have friends who I can go to and I can just, hey, I want to, maybe I'm interviewing for a role back in the day, and I want to just give you my intro, my pitch about myself, and they can say the hard things to you. They can say things like, it sounds like you're apologizing for not having a traditional career role instead of emphasizing the value that you bring to the table because of this. And so you need those people that are going to be, objectively pushing you forward, and creating those moments for you. And the people that are going to pull you forward, recommend you for roles, that, are really going to champion you. And that's something you should do for others. I love to, get to connect with people, hear what they're doing, what they're interested in doing. And it could be 6 months down the line, a year down the line, making those additional connections. Hey, you told me you were interested in this role. You're still looking. I know someone who's hiring now, and really starting to build that, because you never know where your opportunity is going to come from and what career path you're going to take. And to the extent that you can help, someone else navigate their journey, which can be challenging, or, like we've talked about with bumps along the road, it's something that I think is worth investing the time in, on both ends of the spectrum.
Absolutely.
Ask you, Ashlyn, a question that I get a lot, and I'd love to hear your answer because I know it's something you're passionate about, is like, how do you get started, right? Like beyond the, here's a networking reception, beyond law school mixed, professors and students, in the early days or later on, like, how do you do it in an authentic way that doesn't feel like you're just kind of bothering people and just, works for you?
Yeah, I think this is hard, right? Like I struggled with this. I talked a little earlier about, meeting with people, and it was really just, it's not an enjoyable experience for me. I walked away feeling so deflated, right? Like that was not pleasant, that was not fun. But I've always been the type of person who's willing to just go, um, ask folks, do you know anyone that would be good connections, and being very specific about what I'm interested in, right? Because, and this happens to me. I'll meet with people. They say, hey, I have someone who is interested in law school, or they're graduating law school. Will you meet with them? I meet with them and I'm like, tell me about yourself, or let's have a conversation. Like, what are you hoping to get out of this call? And they don't know the answer to that, right? And so now it's like, I've just spent 20 minutes with someone who does not know what they want to talk about. They're not asking me any questions, right? Like, I'm just pulling threads here, versus those people who reach out and they say, hey, I'm interested in learning more about an in-house role in this capacity, whatever that context is, really creating the opportunity to understand like what it is you're looking to network about, I think helps bring people to the table. My dad always says everyone loves to talk about themselves. So, having that as like the opener, I'd love to learn how more you got to where you are, has definitely helped me. And just sometimes putting yourselves out there. I post on LinkedIn occasionally. I'm open to chatting with folks who are, graduating law school, and just making those connections. And some of those folks I still stay in touch with, and it's been over a year now, or just about a year. And so I think just putting yourself out there, which can be hard, is sometimes the easiest but more challenging way.
Yeah. No, thank you. I agree, and I am still like in that point of my career where I'm sitting on both sides. I have plenty of mentors, and I have many that I am a mentor for as well. And I find that when I'm on the mentor side, the more specific that somebody is in their questions, what they're wanting to learn, what they have to ask me, the easier our relationship more naturally goes, and the easier it is to connect them to others in my network, or to kind of lead them or guide them based on what their questions are. And so I feel like that's also helped like shape me, as I reach out to people. I mean, most of my mentors now I've had for established for a number of years, so it's not really new. But when I am making new connections that I'm like looking for that from, or advice or guidance from, then yeah, I find that's the same for me, that I'm kind of reformatting mine to be specific based on what I've learned.
And one last thing I'll say on this is one thing that I've done over the years in some of my past roles specifically, where I would get feedback in my performance reviews. I would take stock of people I worked with who were really good at the thing that I was being told I needed to improve on, and I would just ask them for 15 minutes for coffee. And I would ask them, what resources have you used to get better at this? What advice do you have? Like, are there any books? Like, really being specific in your network, but that not only if you're doing it within your company, are you, benefiting and learning and kind of thinking about how you can up level yourself, but you're creating connections, and creating those business relationships outside of just like the deal, or, the legal issue at hand. And I think that really does help foster longevity in your network and your the relationships that you have with folks.
Definitely. Ashley or Alyssa, anything to add about, building your network specifically? Any mentors in your life?
I think for me, but when it comes to building a network, I mean, I feel like I've said this a couple of times. I don't mean to sound like I'm repeating myself, but understanding the why behind the network you're building and being very specific about it, because networks can be leveraged for so many different things throughout your career. So if you come at it and you are trying to find an all-in-one network or all-in-one solution in a mentor, that can make the search daunting. That can make what you get out of that mentor or that network or relationship feel like it's not hitting that mark for you. And that's because you set it so high. So, really taking stock of the specific things you need and not being afraid to ask for those things specifically. Because the truth is, the worst that can happen is you can get a no or you can get no response, but you put yourself out there. And the more you do that, you're building up that confidence, and it will feel so natural and less daunting of a task. Because I remember when I started out networking, I was like stumbling through saying my name because I'm like, I don't know why I'm here. Like, I showed up. I thought like this was just going to be super easy and it was just going to come naturally. And the truth is, if you don't have a plan beforehand, it won't. So definitely putting in that work on the back end to really manifest the success on the front end.
I love that, Ashley. Alyssa, what about you? I saw you come off mute.
So I was going to add to what Ashley was saying about, you know, kind of finding those different people. And one of the things that for me, since I've switched areas of career, is finding those connections and kind of keeping them in my back pocket and keeping them going, because I never quite know where their path is going to take them either. And and keeping those connections up that seem the most natural, and where we seem to connect on more than just the topic at hand. So, for instance, at one point I was going through, when I was looking to get out of government, I turned to my someone in my network who I had helped transition into government. And they in fact had helped me get my way into a clerkship and go that way. And so that back and forth, and kind of keeping up all of those different options is so important, because we don't really live in a world anymore where, most of us at least, don't go from law school directly into a firm and stay at that one firm our entire careers. There's a lot more movement, and so you never know where someone is going to pop up, or who it is that you're really going to have that connection with to get even just another perspective on something.
Absolutely. So it sounds like basically through all of this, you are building your personal brand, you're reaching out to people and putting yourself out there. And Krista, one thing that I know you love to talk about is really like building your brand. Do you want to talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, and apologize for popping off camera. There's a fire alarm going off in my shared workspace, so I'm sitting outside now trying to finish. Yeah, listen, I personally believe that to distinguish yourself as in-house counsel, you have to figure out what kind of in-house counsel you want to be. And I'm not talking about, are you transactional, litigation, employment, compliance, regulation? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how you are going to be effective in your role. And of course, that comes with all of the generic things that you hear in many, similar webinars about understanding the business and getting your feet wet and forming relationships. All those things are important. Your expertise and what area you're going to practice in is important, but really figuring out how to be and what it looks like for you to be a strategic business partner, because that is what we as in-house counsel are really challenged to be, is how to elevate, level up our businesses so that they are better because of our involvement. Now, to me, to strengthen my internal influence, I often start externally, right? I'm like many others of you, I'm developing thought leadership. I'm publishing articles on blogs, like legal trends relevant to my industry. I'm speaking on panels like this, webinars, conferences, to showcase knowledge, and that's all building up outside credibility, which translates and helps you to establish that in-house as well. Um, I'm constantly looking for ways to collaborate with my business teams to show my strategic value and to gain visibility, not just for me to promote Krista, but really because by finding ways to wield influence and to build points of collaboration with internal teams, it really helps to make you indispensable. So there's many ways, but the importance of personal branding for in-house counsel, I don't think can be overstated.
Absolutely. Anything to add from anyone before we kind of get into advocacy and really advocating for yourself? Cool. All right, let's move on. So, advocating for ourselves is something that maybe comes naturally to some folks, but generally not everyone. So, I'm curious, Ashlyn, I'll start with you. You talked a little bit about really demonstrating the value that you bring to the table versus apologizing for maybe the experience that you don't have. Can you talk about that a little bit more and how you actually did advocate for yourself in that way?
Yeah, I think that, look, over my career, I have had instances where I'm going into performance reviews and I'm hearing what my peers are kind of how they're pitching themselves in their performance reviews and kind of what I'm saying. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Like, you sound really good. Like, I need to rethink how I'm framing what I'm walking in here. I'm like checking a box, super, tactical. And not really looking back and reflecting on the actual accomplishments and value that I've provided. I'm just like drafted X contracts, not like drafted X number of contracts that resulted in Y number of revenue, right? Like there's more to this story that could be told or could be shared. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's something that is not natural for me personally to be advocating and thinking about how I'm going to advocate for myself. I'm much better doing that for someone else. And so I got a career coach at various points in my career, or even during law school, just like someone that you can go and talk to that is objective, that is going to help you think through how to have the conversations, whether it's about advocating for yourself, your position, your pay, whatever it is, or if it's just more tactical, like here is a skill I know I need to up level in my current role. It's not specific to any performance related metrics or anything, but I just need some objective guidance. You can do that with friends. I also have a good network of friends who I'll bounce ideas off of and talk to. But I think that really just understanding, you know, how you phrase and the way you say things about yourself and others has a direct impact into the value that's perceived on the other end. And you need to really make sure that you are investing the time when you're communicating, you know, what you're doing, how you're bringing value, and what you're going to do and continue to do to bring that value is important, because there are two ways to tell every story, and one sounds a heck of a lot better than the other. So find that one that sounds like the best version of you.
Absolutely. So yeah, advocating for yourself, not always the easiest. Sometimes it's easier to do for other people, but really just like finding the value. Ashley, anything to add there? Maybe a point when you've advocated for yourself on a project or anything of the sort?
Yeah, absolutely. I have found myself in positions where maybe, well, not maybe, where my title did not match the work that I was doing, and having to advocate for myself for the title that I deserved. And one thing that really helped me do that was collecting and leaning into the data behind the why of why I deserved X, Y, and Z title. And so I pulled that data internally and externally. So, my internal data pulling was looking at my actual output within the organization, looking at the feedback that I was receiving, looking at my output compared to some of my colleagues, and like looking at the differential between the output, the titles, and then looking externally to see, hey, what are the titles of people who are doing the list of things that I'm doing? And what are their salaries? And building that case and building up my confidence in the ask that I was making for a title or salary, and feeling that helped me feel really empowered in making the ask. And then, when you make the ask, you have that little waiting game when you have to see, what the response is going to be. And um, while I was in that position and situation, I realized that, hey, this is not my only avenue or path to get that title or to get that salary that I deserve. Ball is an X, Y, and Z court, but I can go open my own door and find a new avenue or path with this data that I've collected, because now I've kind of quantified and qualified my worth, instead of, thinking, oh, I deserve X, Y, and Z, but I don't really know why, other than that I really want it. But like, no, data, writing on the wall, feeling empowered to make those asks, and building up confidence, and knowing that, um, leverage your network to do it, but also know that you have the power to go and look at some of these things yourselves, and really, build up your inner knowledge base around it too.
Definitely. Alyssa, I see you nodding your head alongside Ashley, so I want to give you a chance to speak before I ask another question.
Or I just really the importance of data. And as an attorney and as a woman, when you come in with data, I'm going to be honest, it's going to come off as being even more impactful because it's unexpected. And it is something I've found throughout my career, of being able to come in and say, look, this is what I'm worth. And I can look at it this way. And, I came from government where there are no negotiations. It's just but everything's public. So you can get a good idea. You start getting an idea of like, what are these different things that are out there? You start getting used to playing with the data and the levels, so that then when I moved into the position at the firm, I came in and I said, well, this is what people are making at this point. And the one thing I will say is that when you come in and you say that, the answer might be no, but you can also maybe move that answer to, let's decide that we're going to look at this again in 3 months. Let's decide that instead of doing this in a year, we're going to relook at my salary in 6 months. And so actually my first year at the firm, my salary changed 3 times because I came in at one point and then we kept relooking at it to say, what am I bringing in? And so I would just, emphasize using that data, looking for those creative paths of maybe where it works for the business and works for you and finding that middle ground. And then just having the confidence to say, as Ashley said, I think it was so great that you said it, Ashley, if the ball's in your court now, I know what I'm worth. I know what I can do. It's your decision of whether you want this to work, which
That's
is hard,
awesome. Yeah.
really hard.
Easier said than done, right? Yeah, absolutely. Krista, anything to add from your end on this?
Honestly, I feel like it's pretty thoroughly well covered. I love the advice about the increasing the if you don't get what you want right now or you don't get everything you want right now, increasing the frequency. I think that's a really important skill to learn. I also take an approach. It's not that I don't use data. It's not that I don't follow the paths outlined, but I try to look at myself and remind myself that men in my roles are very unapologetic in their pursuit for more. And so I'm always demonstrating, my value, accounting for that value, and trying to quantify it in dollars or some other measurement, and supporting that with data. But I'm also unapologetic in my pursuit of it. And I think that approach is really important.
Yeah, definitely. Krista, you're having a literal fire drill today, huh? Awesome. So I know we're nearing time here, but I definitely want to just like wrap up with some advice, whether that's advice that you've gotten, advice that you've given, basically the best piece of advice. I'm going to start with you, Krista. Any parting words of wisdom for our audience today?
Yeah, I'm going to give advice that's pretty on brand for me, which goes with what I was just talking about a few minutes ago. And that really is that in law school, we're taught rules, we're taught black and white, but the practice of law, it's not about knowing the rules, it's about solving problems. And I think if you can distinguish yourself as a lawyer that provides solutions instead of recites statutes or case laws, your value is going to come from your ability to navigate complex problems, mitigate risks, and empower your business team, your C suite, whoever it might be, to make informed decisions. So approach every challenge with a curiosity and a problem solving mindset. And I think you'll always be indispensable.
Awesome. Thank you. Ashley, I'll pass it to you.
Um, my takeaway or my advice is to really pursue the things that you are passionate about and do them so well that people can't take their eyes off of you, and that's who they're thinking about when this thing comes up.
Love it. Alyssa, what about you?
Like the best piece of advice I got when it came to moving into in-house counsel was the idea that your job as a lawyer is to be where executives outsource their worry. So that people pay attorneys to worry for them. And to then you have to build up that trust so that you can look at the problems and tell people when they have to worry and how much they have to worry about something. And so really working on that skill of being able to succinctly talk about risk management, I think is the biggest thing.
Awesome. And Ashlyn.
Yeah, and this is probably so obvious, but I think worth stating is that no one owns your career journey and destiny other than you. And you don't have to sit and wait around for someone to move your, as my mom always says, like move your cheese, for you. Like you can go and, move your own path. It does not have to be dependent on anyone else. And if, it's not working for you anymore and you feel like you're, not in the right fit, whether that's from, it could be for a whole host of reasons. Don't just think about it. Just make a change. Which is hard, but necessary.
Absolutely. I love that there have been a lot of references to other strong females in our lives during this webinar as well. So that's very, very cool. Well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. This has been an incredible conversation. We will be sending out the recording in the next 48 hours or so. So if you missed anything or want to double click into anything, you'll have the opportunity to do so. So thank you all. Really appreciate it. Bye.